Of the trying long march, the Red Army makes light. Thousands of rivers and mountains are barriers slight. The 5 serpentine ridges outspread like rippling rills. The pompous Wumeng peaks tower, but like molehills. Against warm cloudy cliffs beat waves of golden sand. With cold iron chain bridge, River Dadu is spanned. Glad to see the Min Range snow-clad for miles and miles. Our warriors, who have crossed it, break into broad smiles. In May 1960, British Field Marshal Bernard Montgomery visited China. In a meeting with Mao Zedong, Montgomery, famous for directing the Allies' North Africa and Normandy campaigns in World War II, commented on the Liaoshen, Pingjin, and Huaihai campaigns, 3 communist victories over the Kuomintang in the latter stages of China's civil war. He said they were as great as any campaigns fought anywhere in the world. Mao Zedong responded, "Those 3 campaigns were nothing. I'm more proud of the campaign we fought in crossing the Chishui River 4 times." Following the Zunyi Conference, which ended in mid-January 1935, Mao Zedong and the other Communist Party and Red Army leaders planned their next move on the Long March. They would head north, cross the Yangtze River, join forces with the 4th Front Red Army, and establish a new base area in either western or northwestern Sichuan province. By this time, the Central Red Army had been fighting for 3 months. From 86,000 men when it started out from Jiangxi, its numbers had fallen to little more than 37,000. Chiang Kai-shek, convinced that the Red Army must be exhausted, was feeling confident. He deployed a huge army to surround and destroy the much smaller communist force in an area northwest of the Wujiang River. In all, he mobilized 400,000 soldiers, made up of 2 columns of Xue Yue's corps under the Kuomintang Central Army, backed up by local militia from the 4 provinces of Sichuan, Yunnan, Hunan, and Guizhou. It seemed that no sooner was he restored to the leadership of the Communist Party and Red Army than Mao Zedong would have his capability tested. Tuchang and Chishui lay on the road the Red Army would have to take. On January the 18th, the second day after the Zunyi Conference ended, the Central Military Commission issued its marching orders. All units of the Red Army would begin to move northward on the 19th and join up in the area of Chishui and Tuchang at the point where Sichuan and Guizhou provinces met. This would later be the site of the campaign Mao Zedong was most proud of, the crossing of the Chishui River 4 times. As soon as the Red Army reached Tuchang in Xishui County, it received news that the Kuomintang Sichuan Army, coming from northern Guizhou, was in hot pursuit. Mao, in consultation with the other leaders, decided that the Kuomintang force had to be defeated before the Red Army could march onto the Yangtze. The Central Military Commission had received information that 4 regiments of the Sichuan Army were on a forced march towards them. In a discussion with Zhou Enlai, Mao Zedong said that their situation was best suited to fighting a mobile battle. In view of this, they should concentrate the Red Army where they were. The Red Army took up a position at Qinggangpo in Tuchang. Fighting began at dawn on January the 28th. The 3rd and 5th Army groups of the Red Army faced Guo Xunqi's Sichuan Army in what would be a bloody battle. As more Kuomintang units arrived, so their firepower grew stronger.
这支只有4个团，实际大概是6个团，6000人，就是1万人，打相持了，哎。
The battle quickly reached a stalemate. However, the arrival of more enemy support troops saw Red Army casualties mounting. An artillery shell exploded beside Commander-in-Chief Zhu De, who was almost knocked off his feet by the blast. Realizing how desperate the situation was becoming, Zhu made to rush to the front line. Ignoring Mao Zedong's attempts to stop him, the 50-year-old Zhu tossed aside his cap and dashed forward.
主动式的集体指挥，这稳定这个战局。
And so, Zhu De and the Keda's regiment joined the soldiers fighting on the front line. They were supported by the Central Red Army, and before long, the enemy began to retreat. Once the forward position had been stabilized, Mao Zedong ordered a withdrawal from the battlefield. The Red Army suffered heavy losses in the Battle of Tuchang. For more than 1,000 of its soldiers, this is their final resting place. The names of some are carved on their tombstones. However, the vast majority of the Red Army dead have not been identified. They are, like the flowers that cover the mountain, nameless. Despite the success at Tuchang, the situation for the Red Army remained desperate. Mao Zedong's basic strategy was to fight if we can win, move away if we cannot. With this in mind, he decided to alter his original plan. In an attempt to confuse the enemy pursuit, the Red Army would change course and head northward to cross the Yangtze between Luzhou and Yibin. The Chishui River rises in Yunnan and flows for 500 kilometers across Guizhou and Sichuan provinces. Along its course, it's flanked by red sandstone cliffs. For over 6 months of the year, its waters run red and turbulent. At its widest, the Chishui is 400 meters across. The first Red Army units reached the Chishui in the evening of January the 28th, 1935. A bridge would have to be built if they were to cross the river. Zhou Enlai, vice chairman of the Central Military Commission, directed the work in person. He urged the builders to finish it as quickly as possible, and by dawn the following day, January the 29th, 2 pontoon bridges spanned the river. Immediately, the Red Army began crossing to the western bank. They used 3 routes, from the towns of Yuanhou and Tuchang to the Gulin-Xuyong area of southern Sichuan. This was the first of the famous 4 crossings of the Chishui River. By now, the enemy were convinced they knew where the Red Army intended to cross the Yangtze. 36 regiments of the Kuomintang Sichuan Army was sent to defend the Yangtze's southern bank, where they worked day and night to build fortifications. Mao Zedong and the other leaders of the military commission agreed that they should abandon their original plan of crossing the Jinsha River at Yibin to the north. Instead, they should advance to the border region of Sichuan, Guizhou, and Yunnan provinces. Following an enlarged Politburo meeting to decide how the decisions of the Zunyi Conference should be implemented, a number of orders were issued. These were aimed at improving the army's fighting effectiveness ahead of the battles to come. The size of the office staff was reduced, with those who were no longer needed being sent to join combat units. The 1st, 3rd, 5th, and 9th Army groups were reorganized into 16 regiments, and any unnecessary non-combat equipment was abandoned. It was then that a secret Kuomintang telegram was intercepted. It revealed that the weakest point in the enemy's encirclement was Zunyi, defended by a single division and commanded by Wang Jialie. Mao Zedong and Zhou Enlai reacted quickly. They would lead the Red Army back across the Chishui River and retake Zunyi. They would then be in a position to defeat Xue Yue's corps of the Kuomintang Central Army, should he cross the Wujiang River from the south to support Wang Jialie's force. Meanwhile, Chiang Kai-shek, never imagining that Mao Zedong would head back across the Chirshui, issued orders to his forces to attack the Red Army in Jiaxi. Having routed a force from the Guizhou army stationed in Xishui that had been sent to intercept it, the Red Army, on the 24th, reached Loushan Pass, the northern gateway to Zunyi. The Loushan Pass, also called the Taiping Pass, lies at an altitude of 1,400 meters. Zunyi is 40 kilometers away, and Tongzi 15 kilometers to the north. A saying is associated with this highly strategic pass. Defended by one man, 10,000 cannot take it. Peng Dehuai, commander of the Red Army's 3rd Army Group, recommended a plan to the Central Military Commission. Essentially, it involved attacking the Loushan Pass before the enemy gained a foothold there. But Lin Biao, commander of the 1st Army Group, urged them to delay the attack by a day so that all units could get into position. Mao Zedong and Zhou Enlai accepted Peng Dehuai's plan. At dawn, on February the 25th, the Red Army's 13th Regiment launched the assault. Loushan Pass and Mount Dianjin nearby were quickly seized. Mao Zedong, when he came to the pass, was moved to write the celebrated poem. Fierce the west wind. Wild geese cry under the frosty morning moon. Under the frosty morning moon, horses' hooves clattering. Bugles sobbing low. Idle boast, the strong pass is a wall of iron. With firm strides, we are crossing its summit. We are crossing its summit. The rolling hills sea blue, the dying sun blood red. The Red Army quickly moved on to take the new part of Zunyi. It then prepared for an attack on the old city. The battle for the old city of Zunyi would witness the death of the most senior Red Army commander to lose his life on the Long March. Deng Ping, chief of staff of the 3rd Army Group, was surveying the terrain from the front line when he was struck by a bullet. He stumbled into the arms of Zhang Aiping, political commissar of the 11th Regiment, and died. Deng Ping was 27 years old. After the Long March, Zhang Aiping wrote an article, Second Taking of Zunyi. And in it he described how the young chief of staff had died. He suddenly fell on my right arm. The bullet had entered his forehead and had come out through the back of his skull. There was so much blood. My arm was dyed red. This granite sculpture in the Red Army Martyrs Cemetery in Zunyi depicts the death of General Deng Ping. When Chiang Kai-shek learned that the Red Army had retraced its steps in an attempt to retake Zunyi, he ordered Xue Yue to reinforce the Kuomintang troops in the city. Xue sent Wu Qiwei, whose division was the nearest to Zunyi, to aid Wang Jialie in defending the city. In the ensuing battle, the Red Army, which had taken the new city of Zunyi, routed the two enemy divisions. Wu Qiwei fled across the Wujiang River. By destroying the pontoon bridge behind him, he abandoned 1,000 of his own men and a large quantity of supplies, which were captured by the Red Army. Meanwhile, the Red Army's Third Army Group had taken Zunyi, and Wang Jialie had retreated to New Daguchang. In 5 days of fighting, the Red Army had wiped out or routed 2 enemy divisions and 8 regiments, killed or wounded more than 2,400 enemy soldiers, and captured a further 3,000. It had also seized 100,000 rounds of ammunition. This was the greatest victory yet recorded by the Red Army since the start of the Long March. The ammunition was especially valuable as they were desperately short of it. Chiang Kai-shek was infuriated by the second loss of Zunyi. He vowed to avenge the disgrace. He traveled with his wife, Song Meiling, to Chongqing, from where he planned to oversee the next battle. He ordered troops under his own command and from local armies in Sichuan, Guizhou, Yunnan, and Hunan to the Zunyi area. While some units were deployed to defend the area to the south, a large force was gathered to launch a massive assault on the city from the north. The plan was to force the Red Army into a narrow area between Zunyi and the Yaxi where it could be wiped out. But Mao Zedong had his own plan, which was to order a feint attack against one place while launching the real attack elsewhere. By deploying forces to the strategically key areas of the Loshan Pass and Zunyi itself, he prevented the enemy from advancing from the north, and he ordered his main force to wage mobile battles in the area around Yaxi, Fengxiangba, and Lubanchang. However, the battle at Lubanchang did not go well. To preserve its strength, the Red Army kept on the move. On March 16, 1935, Mao Zedong ordered the main force to cross the Chishui River at the Maotai Ferry and head to southern Sichuan. The aim of this, the third crossing of the Chishui, was to make the enemy think the Red Army was planning to cross the Yangtze. The feint would confuse the Kuomintang and allow the Red Army to move into Yunnan province, cross the Jinsha River, and reach Sichuan province to the north. With the Red Army marching first in one direction and then suddenly changing to another, Chiang Kai-shek and his army commanders were baffled. Even some of the communist commanders themselves began to talk. We're moving from one place to another. Where are we really going? The Red Army's third crossing of the Chishui River convinced Chiang Kai-shek that the aim was to head north to the Yangtze. He immediately ordered his forces to southern Sichuan, where they would take up a defensive position and destroy the Red Army in the area of Gulin. He said, "If I can't wipe the Red Army out this time, I won't have the face to go on living." Mao Zedong, realizing that Chiang had been taken in by his deception, ordered the Central Red Army to withdraw and move without delay to Erlangtan, Taipingdu, and Jiuxikao. From there, they should cross the Chishui River for the 4th time. This left the enemy trailing in their wake. A further maneuver took the Red Army through a gap between 2 Kuomintang units and across the Wujiang River, from where they marched towards Guiyang. Guiyang was garrisoned by 4 Kuomintang regiments. The Red Army's advance threw the city into a state of panic. Yan Daogang, director of Chiang Kai-shek's personal staff, recalled what happened. Chiang Kai-shek directed the battle himself. He deployed his combat units over the phone. Xue Yue, commander-in-chief at the front line, appeared no more important than Chiang Kai-shek's orderly. In fact, the Red Army's plan was to go to Yunnan province, cross the Jinsha River, and join forces with the 4th Front Red Army in western Sichuan. Its advance on Guiyang was a feint designed to distract the main force of the Kuomintang's Yunnan army. To convince the enemy that theirs was a genuine assault, the Red Army fought fiercely on their way to Guiyang as far as the airport, 10 kilometers from the city center. Chiang Kai-shek responded by ordering his troops in Guiyang to defend the airport to the last man. Fearful for his own safety, he sent a telegram to Sun Du, commander of a column of the Yunnan army, ordering him to come and rescue him. At the same time, he recruited 20 guides and prepared 12 horses and 2 sedan litters for himself and his wife, Song Meiling, so that they could flee at any moment.
像蒋介石呢，因为我们说是真是要去打贵阳，他就要把云南的队伍赶快调过来增援他。
After receiving its orders, the Yunnan army reluctantly set off for Guiyang. Mao Zedong, after learning of its departure, ordered the Red Army to change course and make a forced march to the Yunnan provincial capital, Kunming. Covering 60 kilometers a day, they crossed the Hunan-Guizhou highway between Guiyang and Longli, with the vanguard quickly reaching a point just 7.5 kilometers from the city. All along the way, the Red Army declared its intention to capture Long Yun, the local warlord. In terror, Long appealed for help to Chiang Kai-shek and ordered all his armed forces to defend Kunming. The situation was developing just as Mao Zedong had predicted. All the enemy troops from across northern Yunnan and those stationed along the southern bank of the Jinsha River were dispatched to Kunming. This left the way open for the Red Army to cross the Jinsha. And so, Long Yun's troops made ready to defend Kunming. But the expected Red Army soldiers never appeared. By the time Chiang Kai-shek realized his mistake, it was too late to intercept the communist forces. The greater part of his army had been left stranded, several hundred kilometers behind the Red Army. Liu Bochang, chief of the General Staff of the Red Army, later recalled, Mao Zedong had once said, "We will win as long as we can lure the Yunnan army out."
The story of China is a story of change. We tell the story because we believe what happens here makes the world different every day.
Life is a journey of discovering different perspectives. We are young, open-minded, and dynamic. We push the envelope and think out of the box.
CCTV News is one of the voices in the world, and our voice is new and loud.
I am from America, but I live and work in China. Great powers have big stories. CCTV News is watching closely.
I like sharp but informed opinions. Television is not just a show. We deliver a voice of reason through balanced dialogue and very tough discussions. We believe ideas matter.
One for all, China 24.
However, in Yunnan, the Red Army's commanders faced a problem. They didn't have a reliable map of the area, and so could not choose the best point for crossing the Jinsha River. But then, fate intervened. The film Waves on the Jinsha River reproduces that legendary event. In April 1935, the reconnaissance detachment of the CPC's military commission column intercepted several Kuomintang trucks and detained 2 soldiers. The trucks, sent by Long Yun, were loaded with Yunnan specialties such as hams and a traditional medicine for treating wounds. A more significant discovery was 2 large leather suitcases. In them, the Red Army soldiers found more than 20 maps, sent as a gift by Long Yun to Yunnan Army commander Xue Yue. Mao Zedong and Zhu De, at the sight of the maps, were overjoyed. They were precisely what they had been so desperately seeking. Chen Yun, the political commissar of the Central Military Commission column, described the scene in his article, Account of Going West with the Army. All the officers and soldiers of the Red Army laughed heartily, and someone said, in ancient times, Zhang Song presented Liu Bei with a map of Sichuan province when Liu Bei planned to enter it. Long Yun presented maps to the Red Army just when the Red Army was also planning to enter Sichuan. The Jinsha River is the upper section of the Yangtze and cuts through deep gorges flanked by high mountains that mark the border between Sichuan and Yunnan. Its waters are wide and treacherous, dotted with numerous perilous shoals. On May 2, 1935, Commander-in-Chief Zhu De gave the order to cross the Jinsha River. The Cadres Regiment of the Central Military Commission, led by Liu Bochang, took the middle route. They were entrusted with capturing the Jiaoping ferry before the 4th. The Chief of General Staff, Liu Bochang, knew only too well that if he failed to take the key ferry crossing, the Red Army might be caught in the deep gorges, where they would be easy prey for the pursuing enemy.
刘伯清下命令，叫这个部队有一个连呐，就是干部团的一个连，都不是战士，都是连排长以上这个化妆国民党军队，化妆国民党军队以后呢，往前。
Liu Bochang and his men found 2 boats at the ferry. He ordered 1 platoon to cross the river first. They also found 4 more boats at the nearby Jiaoping ferry port. Zhu De, on receiving the news, ordered Lin Biao and Peng Dehuai's corps to head straight there. His telegram read, "There are 6 boats at Jiaoping. Each can take 10,000 men across in 1 night. The men must cross the river without cease." Between May 3rd and May 9th, 1935, the bulk of the Red Army reached Jiaoping. The soldiers were transported across the Jinsha River on boats that shuttled constantly backwards and forwards between the 2 banks. Liu Bochang stood on a huge rock, directing the operation. The rock later became known as General's Rock. For 7 days and nights, without interruption, the 6 wooden boats ferried the Red Army soldiers across the river. They faced no resistance, as the Kuomintang forces were still in the area of Kunming. Not a single man was lost in the crossing, and they were all long gone by the time the Kuomintang reached the river, the day after the last Red Army units had crossed.
国民党地协完最后呢，到了吉沙江边啊，我们封制他，他建了一双破巢穴，没有觉得什么东西啊。
金沙江流水的响啊响叮咚，将士的风卷子来呀都将，不怕你水行着河流急。 更不怕山高的路头长，我们军团长，我们军团长，下决心渡过你金沙江。
This is the song the Red Army soldiers sang as they crossed the Jinsha. The successful operation created a brand new situation. The entire army, from its commanders to the ordinary soldiers, now truly appreciated the wisdom of Chairman Mao and the genius of his outflanking tactic in crossing the Chirshui 4 times. The Red Army crossed the Chirshui for the first time on January the 19th, soon after leaving Zunyi, and crossed it for the 4th time on May the 9th, 1935. During the intervening 4 months, they marched several thousand kilometers and fought more than 40 actions, major and minor. They escaped the clutches of a Kuomintang army, many tens of thousands strong, and frustrated Chiang Kai-shek's attempts to wipe them out in the Sichuan-Guizhou-Yunnan border area. The CPC Central Committee and the Red Army, in reversing the potentially fatal situation, gained the initiative prior to undertaking the next phase of the Long March.
毛主席自己讲，石头技术是他第一之作，但是我们讲石头技术是保救了红军。
他要照我的看法，也可能是决定红军胜败的最后第二一战。
Clearly, the decision to cross the Chirshui River 4 times had not been planned in advance. It was a response to a rapidly changing situation. The Red Army, being numerically much weaker than the Kuomintang, needed to preserve its strength so that it could open a new phase in the Long March. Mao Zedong's exploitation of all possible favorable factors epitomized his brilliant military leadership. The Red Army's skillful maneuvering made a deep impression on several enemy units and their commanders, principally the Yunnan, Sichuan, and Guizhou armies, where it was described as unpredictable and mysterious. The Kuomintang's Central Army talked about it being a burning shame for those forces that had undertaken the campaign of pursuit and annihilation. American writer Harrison Salisbury, in his book The Long March, The Untold Story, wrote, "The Long March was unique. It is incomparable. The campaign to cross the Chirshui River 4 times was the most glorious chapter in the history of the Long March." To paraphrase Sun Tzu's Art of War, water shapes its course according to the nature of the ground over which it flows. He who can modify his tactics in relation to his opponent and thereby succeed in winning may be called a heaven-born captain. By the time the Central Red Army, led by Mao Zedong, had crossed the Chirshui 4 times and the Jinsha once, other units of the Red Army had embarked on their own long march. They started from various parts of the country and followed different routes. On November the 16th, 1934, the 25th Army Group had set out from Hejiachong in Loushan, Henan Province. 10 days later, they were caught in an enemy ambush near the town of Dushu.
天气最冷的时候是寒流，咱们在山里面不习惯，那冻的实在不行。结果弄到敌人那个包围圈叫独树镇。
The 25th Army Group comprised just 2,980 men. Not counting clerks and support personnel, its combat capability was the equivalent of a single enemy regiment. It faced the Kuomintang's 15th Brigade and a cavalry regiment numbering nearly 10,000 men in total. Although seriously outnumbered, the Red Army force could not avoid a confrontation. Political Commissar Wu Huanxian gave a yell and charged the enemy, holding high his broadsword.
吴汉先就高喊：“同志们，现在我们是生死关头，不能退，退了就是死路一条。”拿了一把大刀，大声一喊：“说共产党员都跟我来！”
The entire unit followed, yelling, "Charge!" The battle was bloody, but the enemy was beaten. The 25th Army Group then crossed the Xuchang-Nanyang Highway and entered the Funiu Mountains. The 25th Army Group, by winning the skirmish at Dushu, proved the truth of the ancient saying, "The brave win in a narrow encounter." Compared with the 25th Army Group's skirmish, the first action, fought by the 4th Front Red Army, was a full-scale offensive, Following the Zunyi Conference, the CPC Central Committee ordered the main force of the 4th Front Red Army to the west across the Jialing River. The plan was for it now to draw away the main force of the Kuomintang Sichuan Army so that the main force of the Red Army could cross the Yangtze to the north and enter western Sichuan. However, Tian Songyao's 28th Army and Deng Xiho's 29th Army had established a strong defensive position on the far side of the Jialing. The Jialing is a main tributary of the Yangtze. In the spring rainy season, its course is wide and swift and its waters were running high. Under the watchful eyes of the enemy, it would be impossible to build a bridge over the river. The only way the 4th Front Red Army's 100,000 men could cross was by boat, but the dangers were obvious. Under the command of Xu Xiangqian, the 4th Front Red Army spent 2 months preparing for battle. It opened the fighting with a fierce bombardment of the enemy's defensive positions on the west bank of the Jialing. Simultaneously, armed units set off across the river by boat. The communist forces quickly overran the enemy's defenses. They then marched westward, breaking through a series of blockades. Within 24 days, they had cleared the west bank of the Jialing of enemy forces, seized 8 county towns in southern Langzhong, and taken control of a vast area with a 100-kilometer perimeter, bordered by Zhetong in the south, Beichuan in the west, and the 2 provinces of Sichuan and Gansu in the north. They had also defeated 12 regiments, numbering some 100,000 men. The Red Army's tactics were becoming more sophisticated. The commanders and ordinary soldiers had become masters of mobile warfare, offensive warfare, and large-scale river crossings. Before long, the 2nd and 6th Army groups carried out a brilliant maneuver of their own. In the spring of 1936, the 2nd and 6th Army groups reached Qianxi, Dadian, and Bijie in Guizhou province, where they set about establishing a Soviet area. Chiang Kai-shek had only recently wrested control of the region from Wang Jialie, the Guizhou warlord. Furious at the Red Army's arrival, he ordered 5 columns of the Kuomintang army to attack the 2nd and 6th Army groups from the east and west. The response of He Long, commander-in-chief of the 2nd Army Group, and Ren Bishi, its political commissar, was to withdraw their force into the Wumeng Mountains on the border between Guizhou and Yunnan. The Wumeng Mountains extend across an area with a perimeter of 500 kilometers. There are many sheer high mountains and few inhabitants. It was the rainy season and the wind was cold and the roads muddy. The Red Army soldiers, who were used to hardship, felt quite comfortable in the dense forest. The Kuomintang, thinking the Red Army's 2nd and 6th Army groups had gone into hiding in the Wumeng Mountains, followed them. But the Kuomintang soldiers were heading into a trap. Under the direction of He Long and Ren Bishi, the 2nd and 6th Army groups performed a series of maneuvers deep among the mountains. They marched to the west, turned to the east, changed their route to the west again, and then turned to the south. After a month, the enemy, completely disoriented and demoralized, withdrew. On March the 28th, the 2nd and 6th Army groups emerged unscathed from the Wumeng Mountains and reached Panxian County in southwestern Guizhou. The campaign they had waged had been a unique form of fighting, one in which a strong enemy was defeated by being outmaneuvered and forced to retreat. Mao Zedong was effusive with his praise. He said later, the 2nd and 6th Army groups moved about the Wumeng Mountains, confusing the enemy. Even we were confused. You moved around without losing a single one of your men. The cost was almost nothing. It is a miracle, a huge experience. You must write a summary for all to study. All along the route of the Long March, the Red Army was forced to fight. Its generals directed battles with superb skill, and its soldiers fought with the utmost courage. When 22 brave soldiers of the Central Red Army defied almost certain death to take Luding Bridge, they created a miracle in the history of warfare. In May 1935, after crossing the Jinsha River, the Central Red Army under Mao Zedong entered Sichuan province. This was territory that was inhabited mainly by ethnic Yi people. Before them lay a wide, fast-flowing river. The Dadu, the major tributary of the Minjiang River, is flanked by sheer cliffs. Its banks are high and precipitous. The only way of crossing it, apart from by boat, was via a chain bridge on its upper reaches in Luding County. During the Qing dynasty, Shi Dakai, Prince Yi of the Taiping Heavenly Kingdom, was driven by the imperial army to the Dadu River. Unable to cross, he and his entire army had been annihilated at a place called Anshuichang. Chiang Kai-shek, after learning that the Red Army had reached the Dadu River, flew immediately from Chongqing to Chengdu. From there, he urged his generals to employ the same strategy Qing Dynasty Governor-General Luo Bingzhang had used and make Zhu De and Mao Zedong the second Shi Dakai. He dispatched 100,000 Kuomintang troops to pursue the Red Army and carry out a pincer movement to drive them towards the Dadu. He also ordered other units to the river's northern bank, where they should destroy all the boats. His plan was to take advantage of the natural barrier provided by the river to destroy the Red Army on its south side. Whether or not the Dadu River could be crossed would decide the fate of the CPC and the Central Red Army. Mao Zedong had appointed Liu Bochang as commander-in-chief of the advanced detachment and Nie Rongzhen as its political commissar. Their task was to lead the 1st Division of the 1st Army Group to open up the route for the rest of the army. On May the 25th, General Yang Dezhi led his 1st Regiment to Anshuichang. There, having defeated the Kuomintang force defending the area, they found a hidden boat. Sun Jixian, commander of the 1st Battalion, led an advance team of 17 volunteers to attempt a crossing. Under intense enemy fire, they forced their way over the river. The Red Army found 3 other boats, but they were badly damaged. Liu Bochang calculated that even if these 3 boats could be repaired, it would take over a month to transport the 20,000 Red Army men across the river.
这个过船的过渡啊，过一趟来回啊，一条船要1个钟头。
漂这个1天多啊，就过去一个团吧。
那么靠这个过我们一个还几万人啊，最后我们的也过了就才讲了。
Kuomintang planes were operating in the air above the Anshuichang ferry. Liu Bochang learned from his scouts that a Kuomintang column under the command of Xue Yue had crossed the Jinsha and was approaching. Also, the spearhead of Yang Sen's 20th Kuomintang army would reach Anshuichang within a few days. With the natural barrier of the river in front and the pursuing enemy behind, the situation was extremely perilous. Remembering the chain bridge at Luding on the upper reaches, the Red Army generals ordered the 2nd Division to march northward along the right bank of the Dadu and part of the 1st Division to march northward along its left bank. They were to make all possible haste to reach and seize Luding Bridge. The distance from Anshuanchang to Luding Bridge was 160 kilometers. The 4th Regiment of the 2nd Division of the 1st Army led the way. Their orders left them with just 24 hours to seize Luding Bridge. But they still had 120 kilometers to go before they even reached it. Meanwhile, 2 enemy brigades were marching to reinforce the troops defending it.
林彪有这个聂永贞、梁李天明。
要我们这一团一天一晚必须把泸定桥抢下来。
It seemed impossible that they could cover 120 kilometers in 24 hours. The road ahead was narrow and twisting. On one side were sheer cliffs and on the other, the turbulent Dadu River. Missing a step on the forced march could result in falling into the river and death. But as soon as the order was given, everyone set off without hesitation.
晚上走吧，下雨啊。它这个路不好走，大山，对面的河，有它这一条路，高高低低，有石头尖尖干。
The 4th Regiment of the Central Red Army marched throughout the day and night. It reached its destination at dawn on May the 29th and quickly seized control of the western end of Luding Bridge.
晚上走，白天走，还得跑步走，边走边打，才到达泸定桥西头。
Luding Bridge lies close to the county town of Luding. The structure, dating from the 18th century, is 104 meters long and 2.8 meters wide. The main span is formed of 13 iron chains covered with wooden planks. By the time the Red Army's 4th Regiment reached the bridgehead, the enemy had removed most of the planks, leaving the 13 iron chains swinging in the wind. Time was pressing, and every minute counted. The order to take Luding Bridge by force was issued at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. All at once, a chorus of bugles sounded, and several light and heavy machine guns opened fire on the opposite bank. Led by Company Commander Liao Dazhu, a storming party made up of 22 CPC members and soldiers of the 2nd Company crawled onto the bridge. Under intense enemy fire, they grasped the iron chains and pulled themselves forward. Several men dropped into the river. The others crawled on, laying wooden planks on the chains behind them so that others could walk across.
他们就爬这个铁索，前面的连子爬索，光打到高桥，第二个连子靠着桥板，啊。 你前地我半个板，他有这半个桥板，用这个办不过，是吧？机关枪很多啊，密集火力风力抬不起头啊。
The storming party was approaching the bridgehead on the opposite side. The enemy attempted to halt their advance by concentrating heavy fire upon them. Oblivious, the storming party rushed into the flames and succeeded in taking the bridgehead on the east bank.
从那火里面过去就是了，有的烧的身上都是火，这不管那个了。
假如是没有这个泸定桥嘞，你在那里等死啊？你在钢球场等死啊？你进来了，你都被消灭了。
In the history of the Long March, the crossing of the Dadu River and the capture of Luding Bridge were among the most stirring episodes. Encountering one danger after another, a single mistake could have destroyed the Red Army. The 20 brave soldiers of the 2nd Company of the 4th Regiment created a miracle in the history of warfare. The victory at Luding Bridge rescued the Red Army from the jaws of defeat. Chiang Kai-shek was shocked and enraged at receiving news of the Red Army's success in crossing the Dadu River. He disciplined Yang Sen and Liu Wenhui the two top generals in the Sichuan army and ordered them to identify others who had failed in their duty. By contrast, on the Long March, the commanders of the Red Army shared life and death with the ordinary soldiers. They also gave them the benefit of their wisdom and courage. This was a key reason why the Red Army could create miracles of warfare. In a war, the situation is constantly shifting, like the course of flowing water. When inactive, a leader should seize the initiative. It was Mao Zedong's flexible strategy that was the source of the Red Army's strength, with which it could deal with all the difficulties and ultimately achieve victory. Warfare is not just a trial of military strength. More importantly, it's a trial of popular sentiment. Without the support of ordinary people, the Red Army could not have taken a single step forward.